Morning. Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I am all right. Thanks very much. I enjoyed that last talk. It was really great.
Oh, good, amazing. Yeah, no, Kate is fantastic. And like I say, like the visuals of the museum was really helpful, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Jack, so I've obviously done your kind of the spiel for what we're going to be
Yes.
talking about today, but we would love to hear it from you. Who are you? What do you do? And tell us a bit about Publicis.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name's Jack. I'm a senior talent acquisition partner at Publicis Group, and I work specifically in our emerging talent and early careers team. So ultimately, my job is to work with people that are thinking about exploring a career in advertising in any capacity. That might be in a really creative role, or it might be the complete other end of the spectrum. It might be a really data-driven role. So my role really is to get out there, educate, inform, hopefully inspire people to learn a little bit more about the sector and then guide you through the recruitment process because again, as Sam's just mentioned, we do hire very differently at Publicis. So it's just about making sure people are really aware about actually how we go through bringing people into the business. And it's all skills and strength based. And I'm sure we're going to get into this in a minute. So it's guiding people through that recruitment journey and then helping you out in your first few weeks as well with onboarding and just settling you into the business and making sure that you're in a really good place to, really put your best foot forward and maximize your potential with us. So super exciting role. I love it. I love getting to speak to people that are just keen to learn more about advertising firstly and seeing people, that join talks like today, or I don't know, that I might meet at a careers fair or an insight day. Fast forward 6 months and they're in the business and they're flying. It's honestly, it's such a fulfilling thing to see. So yeah, that's my role.
Amazing. Okay. And just for context, because there will be some people watching from schools that maybe are a little bit younger,
Yeah.
what exactly is the advertising industry?
Yeah, great question. And there's probably still a bit of a myth around advertising and what it actually is. But ultimately, our job as a business is we will partner with brands. So they will come to us and they will say, we might have a new product or a new service that we want to launch and promote. Can you help us with any aspect of advertising? And that might be doing all of the really cool creative design led work. So actually coming up with what are the concepts of what we want this ad visually to look like. So that'll be where our art directors and our copywriters are literally banging their heads together, brainstorming really amazing ideas to actually come up with what does the concept look like. Because every ad that's ever been created started with an idea in a room somewhere, and that's been the case since advertising very first started all the way up to now. So like that's never changed, which is really cool. So we might do that work, so actually coming up with the visuals and the concept of it. We might do the production work, so actually that's when we take those ideas and we actually bring them to life, and that might be through a live action shoot. So you might be out and about in the city and you might see, there's a production crew capturing loads of footage. Usually that's a production crew from an advertising agency. And what they're doing is they're taking hours and hours and hours of footage, which we will then get back into our editing studios and chop down into a 30-second TV ad, for example. So there's that role which we can do as well, which is really cool. We can also handle all of the PR for brands as well. So PR is all around actually how do we shift the public's perception of a brand or of a product. So really cool work. How do we ultimately earn fame for a brand? And that might be through working with journalists in the media. It might be doing some really cool, slightly out there like live stunts where actually, you'll see a lot of brands like take over tube stations, for example, and things like that. So we might do stuff like that that just gets people talking about our brand, which is really cool. And then we can also handle all of the media and the analytics and the data. So if you're someone that's maybe a bit more numerical, media is really cool within advertising as well, because you do less of the shiny, cool design, creative led stuff. You do a lot more of the, is this campaign working? How do I actually get the campaign out there on the right channels? And how do I look at reports and systems and understand what are the key insights? So it's an industry where, and I'm such a believer in this. There's a career path for absolutely anybody, whatever your academic background, wherever you are in the country, whatever you're interested in, whatever your skills. Advertising is really unique because it does offer something for everybody. The hardest bit, which we're probably going to talk a bit about this morning, is then just figuring out, well, what area is right for me. So, in a nutshell, advertising is we'll partner with a brand and we'll do anything and everything for them in order to get an ad in front of a consumer.
Amazing. And just to add to that as well, because one of the themes this month is that we're highlighting the fact that the creative industries is not necessarily London centric. You guys are based in London, obviously, well, you are, but you have offices kind of all over the world.
Yeah, yeah, massive global business. I think we're in over 100 countries globally with over 100,000 people. So it's Publicis is, and you said it in the intro, one of the biggest ad companies in the world. It's often the biggest ad company or the biggest company that people maybe haven't necessarily heard of because we're doing all the work behind the scenes for brands.
Exactly that. So yeah, for everyone watching, every time you see an ad campaign, there is an agency, quite likely Publicis,
Yeah,
who's
quite
created it,
like
and
you
you don't
probably
know
said.
this. And advertising is needed all over the UK as well. So yes, there are lots of agencies based in London, but there are lots all over the UK too. So
Absolutely.
if you want to work in advertising, you don't need to stay in London necessarily. Okay, so let's talk about, yes, what your team look for, because we have, you've mentioned a couple of times that you have slightly different ways of hiring. What do
Yes.
you guys look for? And also, how do you hire? What is this innovative practice?
Great question. So our hiring model for our entry level roles is all based around skills and strengths. So it's not based around academic achievements and it's not based around experience, because there are unfortunately still entry level jobs that you see get posted and you read the job ad and it says you need 2 or 3 years experience, and it's like, how are you ever going to have that? So we're really firm on it's no experience required for all of our roles. Like I said, it's a skills and strength based model, so everything that we look for is skills and strengths that you could have acquired throughout your school life or just your life in general so far. So let me give you an example of some of the things that we're looking for on the softer skill side of stuff. We're looking for communicators, and that's one of the biggest skill sets that we would look for anybody applying for any job. Um, Ultimately, our job is to communicate on the behalf of brands, right? We're taking their messages and we're communicating it to audiences. So we need ourselves to be good communicators. And by that, I mean, you need to be able to talk to people. So you need to be able to sit in a room with your manager, with your team, with clients, and have a conversation and be able to be really clear and concise in how you're communicating. Where stuff goes wrong a lot of the time in advertising is when stuff's misinterpreted or stuff's not clear. So actually having people that are good, clear, confident communicators is super important for us. We're also looking for people that are really organized. And in the last talk, I heard the word organized. That's probably going to come up in every single talk. But again, that's massive, right? Because we're constantly working with hundreds of different brands, thousands of different campaigns at any given time. We need to know what's going on. So we need to be able to prioritize our work, come up with a plan of how we're going to deliver this work each day and each week. And there's no set way of doing that, right? Everybody's different when it comes to being organized, but you need to be able to sort of demonstrate how you go about organizing yourself, again, in everyday life. And some good examples of that when people get to assessment centers and interviews, which we'll talk about, is, your schoolwork. Like, schoolwork piles up when you've got exams or you've got essays or coursework you need to submit. It's like, you have to organize yourself in a way to be able to deliver all of that. So there's a really tangible example there that you can bring into your interviews. So communication, organization, working as part of a team, being a good team player. I don't think there's a job in advertising. There aren't many jobs in any sector anymore where you're completely on your own and you don't have to work with somebody else. So again, being able to work with others, contribute to team projects. But I think the biggest thing is, and this is a skill that probably takes a little bit of time to learn, is being able to work with different types of people, different work styles, different personalities. And my sort of nugget of info for people is try to be the chameleon in your group and in your team where you can get along with everybody. And actually, if you're working with somebody that might be really creative and really expressive, you might have to have a completely different approach with them than somebody that's maybe really data driven or really direct and straight to the point. If you have the same approach for both, you're probably not going to get the most out of both of those conversations. So being able to flex that style and really contribute as part of a team is really important. So they're sort of the core soft skills that run through any entry-level job at Publicis. And then depending on what you're applying for, there's then some like technical or craft skills needed. But again, you don't need experience for this. And by that, I mean, if you're going for a more design, creative-led role, well, you'll need to demonstrate your creative thinking, for example. If you're going for a more data-driven role, you'll need to demonstrate your numerical skills just in some way. And we design our interviews and our assessment centres to give you the opportunity to do that. So the soft skills run through all of it. And then there's just some technical bits depending on the specifics that you're applying for, which is really cool.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I feel like all of the examples that you've given there, everyone watching will be able to self-identify with, all of those different things. If you are really good at doing your homework and you're very organized, then yeah, clearly your organization is bang on. If you're not,
Absolutely.
maybe that's not your strength.
Absolutely.
These are very applicable to everyone watching. And so you've mentioned the assessment centres or the skills assessment. What does that look like? What's that process?
Yeah, so when you actually apply for a role with us now, I'd probably say for 95% of our roles, we don't do CVs and we don't do cover letters. There are one or two really, really, really specific roles where we do, but that's only because the technical requirements for them is extremely niche. But for the majority of the roles, there's no CV or cover letter. What we actually ask people to do is, firstly, we ask you to answer two intent-based questions for us, which is usually, why do you want a career in advertising? Why are you interested in working with us at Publicis? And the reason we do that is advertising is a sector where you've got to enjoy it, you've got to be interested in it and naturally curious. I would say if you see an ad and it makes you think and you go, oh, that's interesting why a brand's done it like that, or actually, I wouldn't have approached it like that. I think I've got an idea that's slightly better. That's the type of like mindset for advertising. It's definitely a sector that if you look at ads and you find them irritating or boring, don't do it. Is my honest advice, because it's a sector that's not for everybody, but it's definitely a sector where you need to get a bit of a buzz from it. So we ask those two intent questions. That's because we really want to know what your why is. And I think actually for any job that you might be applying for in any sector, the why is really important, because I can't think of a company that's not going to go, why do you want to work here? So being able to articulate that's really, really important. So it's those two intent-based questions. Then we will send you a link to complete an online assessment. And this is for us to be able to understand your skill set. So we partner with an external tech company called Arctic Shores. So you'd get an email through from them, and that would bring you onto basically an online dashboard, and it's all gamified technology that we use. So it's not psychometric testing where you're answering questionnaires about yourself and stuff like that. It's gamified technology. So if you've never done it before, it will feel like you're playing an online game. It probably won't feel like you're applying for a job, and some people can slip up sometimes with that. You've got to remember that this is a job application. It's just being done in a completely different way. And what this technology is doing is it's giving you gamified scenarios, and it's basically seeing what your natural skills are. So what it's not a pass or fail. I always frame it as it's a skill suitability assessment. So let's say we're recruiting for a role that is really, really creative. So we need good creative thinking, we need problem solving, we need that type of skill set. If I was to complete this Arctic Shores assessment, my natural sort of way of thinking probably is more aligned to that than it is a data-led job. So what will happen is you'll complete the gamified assessment. As soon as you've completed it, within about 15 minutes, you'll get a report emailed to you, which is a breakdown of all of the skills and strengths you've just demonstrated in that assessment. So whether or not you're progressed through or not, the great thing is you get instant feedback from what you've just completed. And these reports, I've done this myself a couple of times. I was a bit terrified about how accurate it was, to be totally honest with you. It had me to an absolute T. But that was really useful. And if you're applying for jobs and trying to find your way, it's really useful to be like, okay, cool, this is actually what I'm really good at. So what we're able to then do is, through the technology, have a look at, Sam, let's say you've completed it. We'd go, right, these are the skills that Sam has shown during this assessment. Do they line up with the skills needed to do the job that you've applied for? Sometimes they do. Fantastic, we'd progress you through. Other times they don't. And that doesn't mean that you're not a brilliant candidate. It just means actually you might be applying for the wrong job for your skill set. So what we can then do is we can look at that, and we can sometimes we're able to suggest, actually, you've got, for example, I don't know, more analytical mindset. So actually these really creative jobs might not be right, but actually you're analytical and you're good with people. Maybe something in account management might suit you a little bit better. Have you thought about that? So it's not a pass or fail, it's a skill suitability for the specific role. And then it basically just means that we're setting you up for success hiring this way. So if you come through this, we know you've got the skill set to succeed in that role. So there's no doubts that you're in the wrong role, or we're putting you forward for something in 6 months, you're going to go, actually, this isn't for me. We know it's lined up really, really well, which is fantastic. So that would be the next stage. And then if we do progress you through, You then have a really informal 15-minute call with a recruiter in the emerging talent teams team that I work in, and that's really informal because we don't want that to feel like an interview. It's not. It's very much a look. You've applied. You've got through. This is great. Let us give you a little bit more information about the role. Let us just ask you a couple of questions just about your skills and what we've seen from the report. From the assessment you've completed, and let us talk you through what the rest of the process looks like, really. So it's just we're going to touch base, a sense check, make sure that everybody's got all of the information that you need. And then we would invite you through, if that's all good, we'd then invite you through to either an assessment centre or an interview. The majority of our roles go through assessment centres. And this is a really interactive half-day session. So what we do with our assessment centres is we're trying to replicate the job that you've applied for as best we can in the assessment centre. So you'll do a combination of a couple of different activities. You'll do 1 or 2 group tasks, and that will be where we will put you in small groups of 4 or 5, and we'll give you an advertising brief. And then it's very much a case of work together as a team over the next 30 to 45 minutes, come up with some ideas, form a bit of a presentation, and then deliver that back to us. And during that, that's where we're assessing your ability to work in a team, your communication skills, how do you organise yourself in a group, and then some of those then more technical bits needed for the specific role. So you'll do 1 or 2 group activities, which is really cool, and then you'll do 1 or 2 individual interviews, where it'll be yourself and one of our assessors. It'll be sort of between 20 and 30 minutes, no longer than that. And that's an interview based entirely on skills and strength-based questions. So again, they're not going to say, tell me about a time where you set an advertising campaign up, because you've not done it. They're going to ask you questions around how might you approach a certain task, or they might ask you questions around your motivation for applying, or they might ask you to give an example about where you've had a challenge that you've had to overcome at some point in your life or in your schoolwork. Those types of questions. So we very much view the assessment centres as a two-way process. It's like we want to get to know your skills even more. We also want you to get to know the business, the team, the roles, and make sure that you're really happy with what it is that you've applied for. That's a half day. They're either done in person in the office or they're done remotely on Zoom. So you've got options there as well. So if you are applying for a London job, but you're not based in London, that's cool. There's remote options for you there. So it doesn't mean you've got to travel down. There's no barriers basically to joining, which is really cool. And then from there, it's an outcome. It's either a job offer, congratulations, this is when you'd start, and we work through that piece with you, or it's you've just missed the mark. Here's some feedback. Let's try and work with you to upskill you. There are other roles. Can we maybe bring you back into another assessment centre in a few weeks' time once you've sort of worked on those bits of feedback that we've given you? So it's definitely a different way of hiring. I'm such an advocate for it. I'm such a believer in using the technology and looking at the skills and strengths. And we're definitely seeing success now with people are passing probation at the best rates that we've ever seen.
Oh,
People are doing well in their roles, and that's because we've got them in the right role. So I've rambled on, but that's the process for the hiring.
I think one of the key things that I want all of the students and the school staff watching to take away is that this really is best practice for hiring. It means that the entire system is designed around getting the best out of the individual rather than just putting everyone through a kind of square peg round hole situation. And I think that's one of the things that I just love most about this whole process. It's about allowing the candidate or the person applying to relax during the process, be natural, have their natural skills out there, and I guess kind of placed in the right role, but also even in the interviews, it's a relaxed process. You don't want to put someone under loads of pressure because then you don't get the best out of that individual, I think it's so forward thinking, and actually we do see it at Eric. We like to think that we are at the forefront of change. We do see you guys as the ultimate example for a thought leader in that hiring process. So I definitely would say to everyone watching, expect more CV-less hiring processes in the future, because we believe that Publicis are leading that charge. We actually are nearly out of time. So we have had a question come through. So I'm just going to ask this really quickly so we get that done.
Sure.
Can you give an example of how students can demonstrate creative thinking, please? That's from Sarah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there's probably a few ways you can do that. The first thing I would say is especially if you're in like a group task, you want to show like your process, not necessarily just your output. And sometimes when you're given a task or a problem, people will sit there silently, go through it, and then be like, right, this is what I've come up with. But sometimes just actually walking through the ideas and how your brains work to have got to that point is a really, really great way of demonstrating that. So that's showing how you've got to the output and then actually what your output there is as well. And also just like talking about how you generate ideas as well. Sometimes at assessment centres like Publicis or other organisations will want to know like how your brain works to have got to that point. So like what is actually going on when you're trying to come up with some concepts, like explain it. And I think where sometimes people go slightly maybe miss the mark when it comes to creative thinking is they'll just go, I've come up with this idea. And it's like, that might be an amazing idea, but there's a whole world of stuff that's happened in your brain to get to that point. So can you demonstrate that is what I would say.
Brilliant advice. Hayley's got her hand up. Hayley, sadly, we're not allowing people to actually talk during this process for safeguarding reasons. Are you able to put your question in the chat? We'll stay on for a couple more minutes to see if Jack has time to answer. And in the meantime, I'll ask you another question. How can someone figure out which department or role is the best fit for them in advance?
That's a great question. The biggest thing you can do to learn more about that is research and attending events. So firstly, just like being here today and listening to all of these different talks, you're already in the right place, because you'll hit by the end of the week, you'll know that there'll be certain companies you will and won't want to work for. Both are really, really good things for you to know. Specific to Publicis, the best thing you can do is we actually run our own webinars every month. They're called discovery sessions, and they're basically an hour long, and they talk through exactly what that question is. So what area is right for you? What would you be doing if you worked in creative? What would you be doing if you worked in PR? What would you be doing if you worked in media? The skills needed and what a typical day looks like. So that's a really good starting point, is to just hop on one of those. They're typically the last Friday of every month. They're only an hour, and that will help you just initially be like, I think I'm a creative person, I think I'm a media person, or whatever it is you are.
Perfect. And we do have those on the Eric app, don't we?
Yes.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Publicis are one of our partners on the Eric app, so they have a profile and everything. So if you go onto Eric and then you follow Publicis's profile, then you actually get notified every time they put something new up, and you'll be able to be first notified when you guys put your next Friday event up. Okay, so Hayley, I know that you did have a question. We might have to end it here for timing reasons. However, Jack, what we will do is, if Hayley is putting her question in now, we will send that over to you afterwards. I know that you know that process well because of National Careers Week. So Jack will be able to answer your question retrospectively over email. So yeah, if anyone has any other questions, please do follow that process as well. Pop your question in the chat and we'll send everything over to Jack afterwards. All right then. Well, Jack, that was phenomenal. It's always a joy having you here. Thank you so much for taking part in yet another careers event.